She called me a filthy black nobody who doesn't deserve to own American land, right in front of my wife and kids. I've never wanted to smash something so bad in my life, but I didn't. Instead, I chose to fight back with what she fears most: the law, the community, and the truth. This isn't just about holding on to my land. It's about dignity, heritage, and not letting anyone trample on my ancestors' legacy just because of the color of my skin. Have you ever been insulted, pushed down, or faced injustice like this? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. This story, it's real. And it started one morning when I found out my land was about to be seized by the HOA, led by Karen, 54, blonde, pink suit, and a heart made of cold stone. I was fixing the latch on the horse barn, sweat pouring down my face in the scorching Alabama June heat, when Mo, my black hound dog, started barking like crazy. I stepped out to the yard, wiped my hands on my jeans, and squinted down the dirt road. A shiny white Cadillac Escalade was parked right up against my wooden fence. The thing was massive, like a president's motorcade, but around here, folks usually roll up on foot or in beat-up pickups, not SUVs the size of a mobile home. The door swung open, and there she was, Karen Whitmore, the so-called Fairhope Community Development Council rep. Really just the head of the HOA that everyone in town dreads. Mid-50s, bleach blonde curly hair like a pile of ramen noodles, decked out in a bubblegum pink suit so shiny it looked like she stepped off the cover of a 1998 Southern Living magazine. Her left hand clutched a nude-colored purse. Her right held a bright yellow clipboard. I knew that color. It's the color of stuff nobody wants: court summons, eviction notices, old tax bills. "Mr. Malik Johnson?" she said, her voice dripping with that tone you'd use on a kindergartner. "I've been the only one living here for 30 years. "Who do you think I am?" I shot back, not bothering with pleasantries. She smiled, the kind of smile that's packed with power and zero care. "We, representing the Fairhope Development Council, are issuing an official notice of reclamation for Lot 47A. This land is part of the planned Fairhope Heritage Experience Complex. You have 60 days to clear out and hand it over." I stepped forward and snatched the paper from her hand. Halfway through the first page, I felt sick to my stomach. Heritage Experience? I raised an eyebrow. What, by kicking black folks off their land and building fake plantation displays for white tourists to snap selfies? Karen kept smiling. "We aim to celebrate local history. There'll be a museum, a farm-to-table food court, and a stage for folk music performances." I folded the paper and stuffed it into my back pocket. "What community are you talking about? Because nobody from this community you're claiming ever bothered to ask me a single word. This land, who do you think first tilled it?" "We have full documentation on the land's origins," she said, her eyes drifting to a chicken hopping over my fence. "Do those records mention how my granddaddy, Raymond Sr., got stripped and beaten by cops in the middle of the road in 1948 just for refusing to sell this land for $200? Karen pursed her lips. She didn't know. And she didn't care. "This is entirely legal," she said. "We have the right to enforce reclamation." I stepped closer. Mo followed, tail low, growling. I locked eyes with her. "If you, or anyone from your damn council, sets 1 foot past this gate without a proper court order, the first thing you'll see is my Winchester 1894 hanging on the wall, and I don't keep it for decoration." Karen took a step back. Not far, but enough to know I meant business. I lowered my voice. "This isn't just land, it's blood. It's my daddy's bare back, my granddaddy's calloused hands, my mama's cries at night when they cut our water to force us out. And now you show up in your strawberry candy suit, trying to turn it into a heritage center?" Karen didn't answer. She turned, climbed back into her Escalade and slammed the door. The tires spun, kicking up a cloud of red dirt, and she was gone in a purr of that cold, quiet engine. I stood there, watching. Hot wind hit my face. My granddaddy's sweat still stained the grip of that rifle in my hand. No music, no alarms, just me, Mo, and the land they were coming for. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the heat or the mosquitoes, you get used to those around here. It was my head spinning like a windmill. I kept picturing Karen in her pink suit, that smirk like she was the principal and I was the troublemaker kid. And that yellow paper, it wasn't just a notice, it was a slap. Not with a hand, but with the law. Then I thought of my great-granddaddy, Elijah Johnson. Elijah was a slave on a cotton plantation by the Tallapoosa River. In 1866, when they declared him free, he had nothing but the name he gave himself and 2 scarred hands. He didn't leave Alabama. Others headed north for a shot at something better. Elijah stayed. Not because he loved this place, he once said. I stayed so this land could see me survive. Years later, he worked for a rich white landowner named Samuel Bledsoe. When Bledsoe died without heirs, the land went up for auction. Elijah scraped together what little money he had, got help from a church pastor, and bought 10 acres of rocky, snake-infested hill land. That's where I live now. Folks say land is wealth, but for Elijah, it was a statement. He built the first house with his bare hands, sawed timber, hauled stones, packed dirt, dug a well, no electricity, no running water, no help. He grew corn, beans, and kept a few chickens. Some years, pests ate the crops. Some years, floods took the roof. He rebuilt. Then one year, 3 white men broke into his house at midnight, burned his pig pen to the ground because they hated the look of black folks. Elijah kept going. He didn't leave, didn't bow, didn't call the cops back then. They'd laugh in his face if he tried. He left his son, Raymond Sr., not just the land, but a rule. You can be poor, but don't let them bend your back when you're standing tall. My granddaddy, Raymond Sr., held the land the same way Elijah did, stubborn as a rock, but fair. He ran a small carpentry shop, making doors, tables, house frames. If you were poor and needed a fix, he'd do it cheap. If you were old and your stairs broke, he'd do it free. But touch his land, not an inch. In 1948, a town development group offered to buy this place for a transportation corridor. They knocked on his door 3 times, upping the price each visit. The last time, they brought 2 cops and a paper they called a requisition order. No stamp, no court. Granddaddy said no. Calm. Polite. That night, 3 strangers in fedoras beat him in front of his gate with baseball bats. Nobody got arrested. Nobody got questioned. My grandma used her nightgown to bandage his head. The next morning, with his left hand still in a cast, he rebuilt the broken gate. My daddy, Raymond Jr., grew up with a saw in one hand and a rifle in the other. He worked wood like his father, but lived in a time when being black made you suspicious just for breathing. He didn't talk much, didn't start trouble, but I saw him stare down cops when they cruised by our house like they were checking a barnyard. You don't need to growl, he told me once. Just stand still and let them know you won't back down. Daddy didn't have much schooling, but he taught me everything with his hands. How to balance on a roof while laying shingles. How to swing a hammer without bending nails. How to measure wood with just your eyes and experience. And most importantly, don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough to keep what's yours. I remember 2002 when I was just past 20. A company from Birmingham came down to buy the land for a water park. They showed up on the anniversary of my granddaddy's passing. Grandma was still alive then, holding a handful of cotton, eyes red, standing at the gate saying, "Not for sale, no negotiations." After that, things were quiet for years. Nobody came. I lived in peace with my chicken coop, small vegetable patch, and Mo barking every morning. But lately, things changed. This town got reappraised. They call it cultural revitalization. I call it resegregation. $5 coffees. Old Man Earl's barbershop turned into a creative studio. They built two-story white houses with fake vintage doors and welcome y'all flags on the porches, like they're playing Southern traditionalist for Instagram. And now it's my turn. When Karen showed up yesterday, I wasn't shocked. I know her type. Polite on paper. Venomous behind closed doors. Her eyes didn't see my house as living history. They saw an empty lot waiting to be developed. But I'm not like the folks they've pushed out before. I've got the original deeds, old contracts, the community behind me, and something they can't buy with money: memories. That night, after feeding the chickens and checking the barn lock, I went inside and pulled out the small wooden box under the floorboards. Inside, the 1899 land purchase deed from Elijah Johnson. Granddaddy's 1948 objection to forced seizure. A handwritten letter from Daddy to the town council, asking to preserve our ancestral land. A black and white photo, my great-granddaddy smiling wide, standing by the oak tree still in my yard today. I opened Daddy's little ledger where he tracked family expenses. At the end of every page, he'd write a short note for the next generation. I flipped to the last page and added my own. February 14th, 2024. They came again. But this time, I'm ready. Tomorrow, I'm heading to the county office with all the paperwork. I'll call Calvin Andrews, the old church lawyer who promised Daddy he'd help if we ever needed it. I'm not rallying crowds. I don't need protests. I just need one thing: to live in peace on the land my ancestors left me. And if they want to turn this place into a true Southern heritage resort, I'll give them a real experience, facing a man who doesn't back down. 3 days after Karen's visit, I got a fancy embossed envelope from the Southern Heritage Legal Group, a law firm based in Mobile. I didn't need to open it to know who they were. They never come themselves. They send letters, proxies, and laws. I tore it open on the porch. Inside was a pre-litigation warning, accusing me of obstructing a legally authorized project and demanding I halt all community activities on my land within 15 days. I laughed out loud. Malik Johnson, the chicken farming, horse riding carpenter, now a threat to regional economic development. Sounds kind of badass. That afternoon, someone from the county tax office knocked. A woman in a striped shirt, hair in a tight bun, wearing a name tag. Auditor. She said I hadn't declared income from my community services, meaning the weekend horse riding lessons I give kids, where parents sometimes hand me veggies, jam, or a 20. You taxing me for carrots and pickles now? I asked. She didn't smile. The next morning, a sheriff's cruiser rolled by my yard. No sirens, no stop. But enough for Mo to bark and for me to see Deputy Glenn's face. The same guy who let my cousin sit in a squad car for 3 hours for looking suspicious. Glenn glanced at me. I stared back. No wave. No hello. We both knew the game. I called Calvin Andrews, the lawyer who owed Daddy a favor. He picked up right away. Malik? Thought you'd only call when you needed help planting wood. This time, I need you to plane a courtroom floor. I said, Karen's back. I told him everything. Calvin went quiet, then sighed. They don't use bats anymore, they use laws. Hurts just the same, but cleaner. He told me to meet him at his office the next day. And bring every paper, birth certificates, maps, photos, anything proving this land's been yours since Elijah? I nodded, even though he couldn't see. That noon, I stopped by the general store for nails. The owner looked at me, gave a weak smile. Still holding on to that land? I got my reasons. Yeah, but you know what people are saying, right? I knew. They said I was holding the community back. Said I was stubborn, stuck in the past. Said, Malik's a good guy, but maybe too hung up on history. I grabbed a case of soda and a bag of chips for the kids, then headed home. That night, I got an invite to an emergency community meeting hosted by the HOA. Fancy paper, purple ink, envelope smelling like a wedding invite. Topic: discussing neighborhood safety and sustainable heritage development. I laughed. Sustainable for who? I knew Karen was pulling a PR stunt, gathering folks, feeding them skewed info, then trotting out a reasonable black speaker to make it look like we should all pack up and leave quietly. But I'd go. That evening, I showed up. They held it at the new community center, big as a church but cold as a bus station. Karen was at the door, pink suit swapped for a white linen dress with lace trim, hair perfect, makeup subtle. She looked like an angel, but I knew better. She was a snake in a wig. Malik, she beamed, all teeth. So glad you came. We want to hear both sides. I didn't shake her hand. The meeting room was packed, chairs lined up like a classroom. HOA folks, white residents in crisp clothes, a few black folks too, but everyone looked tense. I sat near the back, not out of fear, better view of the whole circus. Karen kicked things off, standing center stage, spotlight on her face. We love this place, but we have to grow. We can't let a few stubborn individuals hold back our community. Scattered applause. Her voice trembled like she was in a play. We don't want division, but if someone refuses to cooperate, we have to act. For safety. For the law. A few heads turned my way. Then she called up a guest speaker, Reverend Charles, a black pastor from Mobile. All smiles and measured words. I believe in preserving memory, but memory can't block progress. Brother Malik should think about the greater good. I stood up. The room went dead silent. I walked forward, not fast, not slow. The spotlight followed. So did the eyes. I didn't need a mic. My voice carried. I'm Malik Johnson. I've lived here my whole life. On land my great-granddaddy bought with his bare hands after being freed. On land my granddaddy bled for, and you want me to sell it for heritage? Pin drop silence. You're planning a slavery museum on the land of a living black man. Doesn't that sound backward? Build a heritage resort for tourists to snap pics in fake log cabins while I tear down my real chicken coop? Murmurs. Some heads bowed. And you, Karen, you didn't invite me to hear my side. You invited me to paint me as the bad guy, to sit here while a paid pastor reads a script to pave the way for you to take my land. Karen tried to smile. I turned straight to her. I'm not a side character in your story. I'm the landowner. I'm real. And if you knew anything about community, you'd know. We've been through worse than this, and we're still standing. Karen stood up. Her face paled. You're causing a scene, she said. I shook my head. No, I'm just telling the truth. And you better start prepping your paperwork. Because I've got a lawyer. I've got deeds. And I've got neighbors starting to wake up. From the back, Old Man Luther, 72, lifelong resident, stood up. I wired houses with Malik's daddy. That land's theirs. I'll testify if needed. Then Miss Helen, white-haired, stood too. Karen yanked the mic. Meeting's over. I looked at her. Nah, it's just getting started. The morning after the meeting, I woke up early. Not out of worry, out of readiness. I brewed coffee, tossed in an extra spoon of brown sugar like Daddy used to, put on an old button-up, slipped on my work boots from my carpentry days, and grabbed a stack of papers I'd sealed in plastic the night before. My '85 Chevy C10 started slow but ran fine. Like me. I got to Calvin Andrews' law office at 8 sharp. He was waiting with a coffee mug on his desk, papers spread out. "We've got work to do," he said, skipping the small talk. I handed him the original deeds. He scanned them fast, red pen scratching, flipping pages like a detective. He stopped at a 1956 boundary map with a red county court stamp. He nodded. "Whichever idiot redrew this boundary was dumb as a cow," he muttered. I looked up. "How's that?" Calvin pulled out the HOA's latest project map, the one they posted online to hype their plans. He pointed. "Right here, their Eco Lake, BBQ Park, and parking lot sits square on your family's 1899 land." I stared. He was right. They'd botched the boundaries, overlapping their project onto my property. "Can I sue?" I asked. "Nope," Calvin said, then grinned. "You can stop their whole damn project." That afternoon, he personally filed a civil lawsuit with the local court, attaching the ownership deeds and historical maps. The motion requested immediate suspension of all HOA project activities due to unresolved boundary disputes. That night, I didn't sit idle. I went to the chicken coop and installed a new security camera. I repainted the sign out front. Carterland, 1899. I put up a smaller one. Private property, under legal dispute, no entry without court order. And I quietly invited the neighbors over for dinner. No talk of Karen, no rallying cries, just grilled meat, baked beans, and iced tea. After eating, I handed each one a copy of my land deed. Said only, "This is the truth. The rest is up to your conscience." 3 days after filing, a reporter showed up at my gate. Renee Ellis, Montgomery Current, petite, metal-framed glasses, voice soft as cotton but sharp as a razor. "Heard there's a land dispute with the HOA?" she asked. "Notebook open. Recorder running?" I nodded. "I'm not one for headlines, but if your story makes Karen stop smiling, I'm game." She sat on my porch chair. I poured tea. We talked for nearly 2 hours. I told her everything, from Elijah to the community meeting. No embellishing, no tears. Just the truth. Like I was talking to someone who'd get it. This land isn't just dirt. Renee went quiet, then asked, "Do you think you'll win?" I looked at the chicken coop, at the oak tree my great-granddaddy planted. "Win or lose, I won't let them erase me from the map." 2 days later, her article hit the front page. Malik Johnson, the face of a 3-generation land fight. Cover photo. Me by the oak tree. Sleeves rolled up. Afternoon light on my shoulder. The story spread fast. Folks printed it and taped it to the bakery window. Shared it on Facebook with captions like, "Not everyone sells out for a BBQ park." Monday morning. The county court sent a preliminary notice to the HOA. All activities related to the Fairhope Heritage Project are suspended until boundary disputes are resolved. Calvin sent me a copy. Bold text at the top. "Construction halted per plaintiff's request." I smiled. Not big, not loud. Just enough for Mo to wag his tail with me. That afternoon, I walked by the back field where Karen wanted her tourist parking lot. A crew was packing up equipment. One guy in a red cap tossed his hammer down, muttering, "Fucking hell, who's this Johnson guy?" I stood by the fence. Didn't say a word. Just stood. That night, I added another line to Daddy's ledger. February 21st, 2024. The law's on my side. First time ever. I thought I knew what it meant to be cornered. Got pinned against a wall by cops for wearing the wrong hoodie. Lost a job for not fitting company culture. But I'd never seen a community that used to shake my hand every morning turn on me so fast. It started 3 days after the article. I was nailing a new board to the beehive when Calvin called. "Malik, The HOA just hired a big-shot law firm from Birmingham. They're not suing, they're trying to choke you out with paperwork. I set the hammer down, lit a cigarette. Where are they starting? They filed a complaint with the planning department, saying your land doesn't meet agricultural standards and you're running an illegal commercial operation. I laughed. They're mad I sell honey? No, Calvin said. They're mad you won't sell your land. The next morning, 2 strangers pulled up. Ford Expedition, out-of-state plates, engine still running. One guy got out, short hair, crisp suit, black sunglasses. Mr. Johnson? Depends on what you're asking about, I said. I'm with the Fairhope Infrastructure Committee. We need to assess your farm's impact on the neighborhood drainage system. I looked at him like he was a shark in a sheep costume. My ditch was built by my great-granddaddy. It doesn't bother anyone unless the HOA is dumping trash in it. He gave a thin smile. We'll be back with an inspection order. On the HOA's community forum, posts started popping up. Nobody used real names, but the words were clear as day. How can they let a chicken farm operate in a modern neighborhood? The smell of manure hits my porch every morning. Heard he's not paying taxes right. Why isn't the city doing something? And then the big one, posted by Karen herself. We all support tradition, but not at the cost of safety, hygiene, and property values. Below it, a blurry photo of me feeding my chickens, snapped from across the fence. I didn't need to ask who took it. Then the real storm hit. 3 letters in 1 week. From the health department, demanding a water quality check for my poultry operation. From the sheriff's office, ordering me to appear for suspected disruption of unauthorized gatherings. From the HOA, demanding I remove my Johnson Ranch since 1911 sign for unapproved aesthetics. I burned all 3 in the burn barrel out back. The fire roared, but the fire in me burned hotter. I started noticing folks avoiding me. Miss Ruth, the old lady who used to take free honey, returned an unopened jar, saying, "Please don't send more." The Boons, who borrowed my tractor, stopped waving when they passed by. Even Sarah, who cried in my arms when the HOA denied her daughter's medical funding, just texted 3 words. I'm so sorry. One afternoon, I went to the market for chicken feed. When I got back, my gate was open. My ridgeback was gone. The coop was busted open. 2 chickens dead. And on the barn door, in big red spray paint, "Sell or we burn." I froze. Didn't yell, didn't curse. Just walked inside, pulled out the printer, and typed up a vandalism report. I didn't trust the cops to help, but I wanted it on record. That night, I sat on the porch. Winchester 1894 by my chair. Not to scare anyone, just to remind myself I'm still here. And I'll hold on. 3 days after the coup attack, I got another HOA meeting invite. No clear reason. Just one line, discussing negative impacts of private lot 19A on Fairhope Estates. I knew that was my land. The meeting was at the old elementary school hall. I got there early, sat in the back. The place smelled like floor cleaner. The whiteboard still scrawled with 3rd grade math, mixed fractions. Left side, young folks in blazers and white shirts. Right side, blonde housewives in floral dresses, tiptoeing like they smelled something bad. Karen sat front and center, mic clipped on, pink suit like cotton candy, lipstick to match. She banged a gavel. We're here to discuss Lot 19A and its incompatibility with our development goals. Who'd like to speak? First up was Fred, the auto shop owner who once borrowed my barn for his grandkids' wedding photos. I think Johnson's land is dragging down our property values. Dusty roads, livestock smells, noisy kids playing. Others chimed in. I've seen more flies since he started those beehives. My kid's allergic to pollen. Probably from his damn daisies. I raised my hand. Nobody looked. Raised it again. Karen played deaf. Finally, I stood. Hold up, I think I've got a right to speak. You're talking about me here. Karen gave a tight smile, voice like a zipping plastic bag. Mr. Johnson, you were invited to observe. This isn't a debate. What if I want to talk? Then you're violating community rules. I stared her down. Funny, I've lived here since before you were in grade school, and now I can't speak in my own community? She leaned back, fake smile. The room buzzed. I sat down, fists clenched. That night, Renee sent me a PDF. Subject line: Confidential, Fairhope Estates, Internal Expansion Plans, unreleased. It was a map of the land. My plot, marked in red, labeled Phase 2, Townhouse Development. Retail Plaza. Renee texted, got this from an inside source. They plan to force your land into eminent domain before even offering to buy. If you refuse, they'll bankrupt you with fines and lawsuits. I didn't sleep. All night. Went to the coop, repainted the door, stroke by stroke. Then grabbed a board and wrote, "This land is my blood and bone. Want to take it? Step over my body first." 2 days later, the power got cut. No warning. No reason. I called the utility company. They said, per local authority request due to safety and building code violations. I looked at the fridge, milk for the kids' riding lessons, chicken, jars of honey. I swore, damn it, no more sitting still. Calvin and I made a plan. We formed a small crew, 3 lawyers, a retired ranger who lived near my land for 20 years, and Renee. I called us the Land Keepers. The plan? File a countersuit against the HOA for improper project permitting. Accuse Karen of abusing authority, using HOA funds for personal expenses. Renee dug up spa bills, plane tickets, Italian restaurant receipts. Prove they staged complaints. My security cam caught an HOA tech pretending to check pipes while unlocking my gate to let Mo out. I printed all the evidence. 3 copies, bound tight. Next morning, I put on Daddy's old shirt, a wide-brimmed hat, and drove to the county courthouse. Inside the clerk's office, I laid the files on the counter. I'm Malik Johnson, here to protect what my granddaddy bled for. The clerk paused, then nodded. We'll issue summons within 7 days. That evening, I put up a big sign on my gate. Court accepted lawsuit against Fairhope Estates HOA. Residents can view public records at the county office. Don't let anyone lie for you. Renee snapped a photo, ran it on the next day's front page. One black man takes on an entire land management system and might win. Midnight. A police siren wailed. Someone reported me for installing a threatening sign. The deputy showed up, stepped out, saw me, saw the sign. He sighed. I read the article. Got in his car, drove off. When the law won't protect you, use it as both shield and sword. Karen could smirk at meetings, point and curse at my gate, but she wasn't smiling when the Montgomery County Court's official summons was hand-delivered. March 17th, 2024, 9:02 a.m. Per the courier's receipt. The lawsuit included abuse of power, using HOA authority to redraw boundaries without community vote, misuse of HOA funds, restaurant bills, luxury travel, 5-star spa haircuts in Birmingham, harassment and vandalism, caught on my camera, plus constant fake complaints. Complicity in civil violence, no direct proof, but a former HOA electrician swore Karen suggested stirring trouble to make that guy give up. The first blow landed on the 21st. Karen's lawyer, Marcus Briggs, withdrew from the case. Reason? Conflict of interest. Street talk. You hired me and lied to me. I'm out. Same day. Calvin and I filed more evidence. From Allison, a former HOA accountant, via email to Calvin. I told Karen the budget was redlining from her event spending, but she told me to shut it down or lose my job. Attached were receipts with a note. Handled, K. On the 25th, Karen got hit with a separate community complaint. 27 Fairhope residents signed a petition for an early vote to oust her. Spearheaded by Louis T. King, 78, white, retired history teacher. Fairhope resident since 1972. He wrote by hand, Karen was once our hope for renewal. But unchecked power is poison, and we've drunk too much. March 27th morning. I got an anonymous package. Inside, a 1949 land map. Signed, confirming the access road to Fairhope was an internal path built by Elijah Johnson, my great-granddaddy, and offered for free public use. Under it, a note. Use this as a weapon. Be careful, they're desperate. That night, Renee called. Karen's reaching out to a bigger developer, Delcor Holdings. They might try to sell off the Fairhope project before the lawsuit wraps. They can't sell if they're being sued? Exactly, but if you win, you could not only keep your land, but make them pay damages. I didn't answer, just looked out at the field. Moonlight stretched over the grass, like when I was a kid lying on Granddaddy's back, hearing stories of Elijah facing down white cops over this land. Next morning, I put on Daddy's leather jacket, his hat, and went to court. 7 people were waiting outside: Sarah, Calvin, Mr. King, 2 old ladies who grew flowers by my garden, and Jessica, Karen's daughter. I froze. She stepped closer, whispered, I'm not on my mom's side anymore. I'm sorry for everything. April 3rd, 2024. First hearing. Montgomery County Courthouse. Main Chamber B. I walked in with Calvin. Navy suit, no tie. White shirt. Hair trimmed. Face serious. Karen came in after pink suit, pearl earrings, Gucci bag, chin up like she was sniffing old money. With her, 2 new lawyers, a platinum-haired guy, Neil Sachs, and a Korean-American woman. Cold as ice. Both from a firm known for turning laws into cash. Karen didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. She strutted like she was at an investment conference. Presiding, Judge Roderick D. Harris. Black. 60s. Deep voice. Before he was a judge, he fought for land rights in South Alabama. He scanned the files, then stared at Karen. Ms. Langford, you're accused of using HOA authority to illegally redraw boundaries, misusing funds, and harassing residents. Your response? Karen smiled. We're just enforcing internal regulations. This man, Mr. Johnson, is occupying land meant for collective ownership. Calvin stood, voice steady. Here are maps and deeds from 1949, 1982, and reaffirmed in 2001. All confirm, this land is the Johnson family's. Judge Harris nodded, flipped through, then cut in. I've seen plenty of HOA overreaches. But you, Ms. Langford, are a rare case. 0 finesse, maximum aggression. Karen gripped her bag. Her lawyer tried to speak. Harris raised a hand. I don't need legal arguments yet. I need facts. And I'm leaning toward the plaintiff. Mid-hearing. A bombshell? A witness nobody expected. Joseph Langford. Karen's husband. Testified on, for me. Bald. Bifocals. Tired looking? Calvin glanced at me. I nodded. I want to be clear. Joseph said. I told my wife the northern land isn't HOA property. It's Johnson's. Elijah showed me the deeds in 1986. But Karen didn't care. She just wanted to expand the project. No matter what. Karen shouted. Shut up! Joseph turned. Exhausted. I've been quiet for 20 years. Not anymore. At the recess, over 50 Fairhope residents gathered outside. Some held signs. Protect Malik. Others brought flowers. A few waved small flags with the original town map, showing my land outside HOA bounds. An old white lady shook my hand. I don't know much about law, but I know this. If someone's willing to die for their land, it can't be stolen with a new map. Karen retreated quietly, but it wasn't the final blow. 2 days later, I got word. The HOA filed a counterclaim. They sued me for damaging Fairhope's community image, public disturbance, and personal defamation. Calvin laughed reading that one. Defamation? She's caught stealing HOA funds for haircuts and claims she's offended? I nodded. Guess she thinks justice is her barber. We hit back. Filed more evidence. A video of Karen ordering workers to break my fence on March 12th, caught clear on my neighbor's camera. Renee ran another story. Karen Langford, from HOA president to symbol of community power gone wrong. It went viral, shared on Reddit, Facebook, TikTok. A clip of my courtroom speech hit 1.3 million views in 3 days. They don't want to build a community. They want to erase our memories. But memory doesn't live on paper. It lives in blood, in dirt, and in how we stand up. April 12th. Judge Harris issued a temporary ruling. All Fairhope development halted indefinitely. Karen Langford barred from any HOA role until final judgment. Louis King appointed interim HOA administrator. That night, I sat alone under the oak tree. Soft breeze, clear sky, light from the house spilled onto the chicken coop. I opened Daddy's ledger, wrote, April 12th, Karen fell off her high horse. The community's starting to see the truth, but the hardest part's still coming. April 18th, 2024. The ambush. I just fed the kids breakfast. Abby was playing with Billy the rooster. Jake was doodling horses on the fence when my phone buzzed nonstop. 3 missed calls. A text from the bank. Your operating account is temporarily frozen per county court order. Contact legal for details. I thought I misread it. Nope. They froze my bank account. Then Calvin called. Voice urgent. Malik. The HOA just filed an emergency petition with the county court, claiming you're using your land for unauthorized and dangerous commercial activity. I gripped the phone. What's that mean? It means if we don't shut this down in 72 hours, they could seize your land under a temporary hold to prevent community risk. Right then, Abby shouted. Uncle Malik, someone's here. I turned. A silver-gray Chevy Tahoe 2023 rolled up to my gate, license plate covered with paper. Inside, Karen Langford, dressed in black, no pink for the first time. Next to her, 2 county deputies and a court rep. Karen stepped out, said nothing. Just handed me a stack of papers. An order. Asset freeze. Based on public harm risk. I looked at her. Got any more tricks? She smirked, small and vicious. I told you, Malik. Nobody needs a tragic heritage in a growing community. They need a golf course. That night, I didn't eat, didn't talk, didn't sleep. Sat on the porch. Cold night. Wind scraped the tin roof like Daddy's sigh. I looked at the house, the coop, the old shed, and thought, all this years of sweat to keep it could be gone with one signature? I whispered into the wind. Elijah, Daddy, if you're watching, give me a sign. I need a miracle. Just this once. Next morning, an anonymous email. Subject, Truth about HOA, urgent, sent from a hidden Gmail. Inside, over 80 PDFs, letters, receipts, secret meeting minutes, all from inside the HOA. Calvin and I sat in his office, opening each one. One made him choke. This, a receipt for hiring a shady PR firm in Atlanta to smear you in 5 local papers. Another email from Karen to her in-house lawyer. If Malik won't leave, use Clause 18C, freeze his assets, and wait for him to break. I closed my eyes. She'd planned to strangle me step by step. Calvin turned to me. We've got a weapon now, and it's heavy enough to drag her to hell. We filed an emergency motion with the Superior Court. Hearing date, April 22nd. That would be the final showdown. Everything on the line. I knew Karen was going all in, but this time I wasn't fighting alone. Part 7. The Final Blow. Part 2 and a 2. April 22nd, 2024. Monroe County Superior Court. I wore Daddy's old suit, black tie, boots polished clean, walking in like it was a battlefield. Not to look sharp, but because I knew this was the same suit Granddaddy wore when he won his land case in 1948. It felt right. The courtroom was packed. Black residents, locals, media, even an ABC News camera. Village kids waved as I walked in. I nodded back. Couldn't let them down. Karen sat across the room, back in her pink suit, loud as ever. 4 lawyers beside her, all in black suits, faces like stone. I looked at her. She dodged my eyes. Judge Dorsey entered. Brown skin, silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, former Atlanta prosecutor. He banged the gavel. Case of Malik Johnson vs. Westdale HOA begins. Calvin led off, laying out the internal HOA documents. Every email, receipt. Secret meeting, presented clear as day. Karen started sweating. Her lawyers kept jumping up, asking to pause proceedings. Judge Dorsey shut them down. Then a surprise witness. Janice Howell, former HOA secretary, please take the stand. The room gasped. Janice had vanished after the first meeting where they tried to roast me. Nobody knew where she went. She stepped up, voice shaky but firm. I kept the meeting notes. I recorded everything Karen ordered. She called Malik a trashy cowboy, a black nobody ruining things, and said, word for word, if those black folks want to preserve land, they can go back to Africa. The courtroom went dead silent. I didn't look at Karen. I looked at my community and saw fire in their eyes. Karen lost it. She stood yelling, I built this community, I kept it from tanking. You people don't get it. Judge Dorsey slammed the gavel. Order, Ms. Langford. Sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. Karen sat, face red with rage and shame. At the end, the judge looked at me. Mr. Johnson, any final words before I rule? I stood, throat tight. But I spoke, not with anger, but with truth straight from my heart. I'm not a victim. I'm just keeping a promise to my granddaddy. They didn't beat me with bats, they beat me with laws. But I learned to use the law to stand up. This isn't about me. It's about anyone who's been told to shut up because they're not the right kind of person. I paused. And if I had to do it again, I'd do every single step. Judge Dorsey nodded, banged the gavel. The court finds the actions of Westdale HOA and former President Karen Langford constitute a conspiracy to seize property, abuse of power, and discrimination. Mr. Johnson's property is fully restored. The HOA is ordered to pay $290,000 in damages. Karen Langford faces civil prosecution and, if warranted, criminal charges. Court adjourned. The room erupted. Abby ran up and hugged me. Sarah stood back, tears streaming. Jake held up an old wooden sign. Carter Legacy Lives. 3 months later, July 2024. We put up a new sign at the gate. Elijah Johnson Cultural Preserve, where history isn't forgotten. The community threw our first festival, jazz music. Bye to you, a kids' riding team, Abby leading in a denim jacket and a red cowboy hat. I sat on the porch steps, iced tea in hand, looking out. No more hate, just pice. If anyone asked me today, did you win? I'd say, I didn't win. We won because we didn't break. And that's how an ordinary man, not rich, not powerful, stood up, held onto his ancestors' land, and took down the so-called HOA power. I didn't do this just for me. I did it for my granddaddy, for my wife, for the village kids, for anyone who's ever been bullied by a Karen in a suit with a clipboard. The lesson? Don't let an HOA or anyone turn rules into a gag to silence you. They've got regulations, but you've got the truth, and the truth can't be foreclosed. If you've faced a Karen, dealt with HOA nonsense, or been pushed around unfairly, share your story in the comments. We don't just read, we listen. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button to catch the next wild HOA story. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose fake power with real truth. See you in the next video. And remember, never bow to a clipboard and pink lipstick.